You're listening to Freight Famous, presented by Rose Rocket, bringing you the people that make trucking move. From behind the scenes into the limelight. Here's your host, Justin Bailie.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Freight Famous, a podcast produced by Rose Rocket. New episodes of Freight Famous will be released about twice a month. On this podcast, we talk with guests about how they build, scale, and automate their trucking and transportation businesses. Today, I want to tell you about Rose Rocket's referral partner program. If someone you know is looking for trucking software or logistics software or a TMS or a platform, as we like to call it now, Rose Rocket would love to have you join our incentivized referral program. To learn more, email us at referralpartners@roserocket.com. That's plural, referralpartners@roserocket.com. And someone from our team will get back to you. I'm your host, Justin Bailie, co-founder at Rose Rocket. I'm excited to introduce my guest today, Kristy Knichel. As the CEO of Knichel Logistics, Kristy is the heart and brains behind the company and a proud Pittsburgh native. So today we talked to Kristy about a whole bunch of things. So the notes on this were a lot around women empowerment. It was going to be, being a woman in the industry, and we certainly get into some of that stuff. And she's very well regarded there, is very focused on woman leadership. 70% of her team are women. And this isn't like a small team. This is a business that went from, they kind of like stalled out at 32 million. She tells the story quite nicely for quite a while, and then just kind of exploded to about $100 million brokerage, offering like a plethora and breadth of products. So super interesting narrative there. She talks about how she built a sales agency and how some of that has worked and some of it hasn't, both operating agents and just sales agents. A lot of family drama stuff. I don't want to give it away, but we kind of start there. And if you are in a family business, if you've been in a family business, and if you're in trucking or transportation, statistically, odds are you are. This is totally going to land with you, but it's really good. It's cathartic in a way because you're not alone in the chaos that is a family business. But her story's pretty juicy, so hang on for it and have fun. Thanks for being here, Kristy.
Thank you for having me.
So, just as we tend to do on the show, I'd love a quick introduction. Could be a long introduction as well. We're not time bound by any means. And I want to hear about your background. How did you get here to be talking with me today?
Sure. So first of all, Kristy Knichel, President, CEO of Knichel Logistics. I actually started my journey when I was 19. I went to college and I quit. It wasn't for me, the first, set that I went to. And I decided to go to a different school for fashion. And I was running a couple pizza shops and decided I wanted to buy one. And I was talking to my dad about it, and he actually convinced me to come work for him. And he worked in the industry. He actually started working for a railroad. We moved from New Jersey to Pittsburgh when I was very young, and he went on the 3PL side at that point, but I really didn't even know what he did. But he basically told me making $40,000 a year wasn't going to be something that I'd be happy with the rest of my life. So don't be a pizza shop. And so that's pretty much it. I was 19, went to work for him, and I'm in my 25th year in business, working in the industry. But I guess to make a long story a little bit shorter, when I first started working for him, he was an agent for another company at the time. And after 6 years, my brother had worked for him and my sister as well. So he went out and opened Knichel in 2003. And all we did was intermodal business at the time. But within a couple years of opening, we expanded into truckload brokerage, LTL. And then by 2007, I became the president of the company. My dad stepped back. And we just continued to grow and build out the business. And we became women-owned in 2012. And just continue to expand the company into different areas like government, supplier diversity, along with an agent program as well. And I guess fast forward to today, our company had grown from pretty much being roughly 2 million in revenue to 100 million last year. And my goal is to continue to grow and be a top 50 broker, hopefully. At some point, I'm trying to keep my eyes on the target of maybe a 300 million as my next goal.
100 million is there's no shame in that number. So, congratulations. And that's
Thanks.
great. And I'm going to assume you don't know this unless you are an avid Freight Famous listener and you've listened to every single show. I'll just assume that you haven't. But in one of the shows, I interview my wife actually, and the reason I do that, it's well, trying to get people on the show can be difficult, so you kind of go to your friends and family. But and as I said in that show, and I'll say it again, she was probably one of the hardest guests to get because she does not like doing things like this. But she owns a 3PL as well, but she started in the asset side, and it was a family business. So she became the president of a relatively large LTL carrier up here in Toronto area, and took that over from her dad and had her family working in the business. So as you're telling me this stuff, and I'm hearing this, I've got a lot of kind of familiarity. So I want to go into a few things, but one thing I want to not glaze over is you said something that you're like, and fast forward, 'cause you're just telling the story and you got to be somewhat articulate in how you tell it. But it's like, yeah, I just took over from my dad and he just stepped back and now it's like woman note. And it's like, that's not how that went. So like, I'm curious a little bit about that process and that transition, and maybe a little more context around. And I think this is really pertinent to the listeners because like transportation companies are just so damn hard to build, and they take multi-generations to build. So if you're a sizable, generally speaking, and a brokerage has some outliers in it, but like generally speaking, especially in asset, if you're a large-ish business or cresting on a large business, you're probably multi-generations because it just does take that long. So I think this is an interesting story. So tell me a little bit about the dynamics between your siblings and then what it was like taking over and your dad just saying, yeah, cool, you guys take it. I'll be on my way and call me if you need anything. And never coming into the office, never bothering you, never questioning your decisions, is I'm sure exactly how that went. So I want to hear a little bit about that.
That's exactly not how that went.
Yeah.
No, I'm very transparent about my story because I think a lot of people go through the struggle, but they don't talk about it. And at one point, I remember some of the stuff I did talk about. My dad literally was like, you need to be careful what you say. And I'm like, I'm just being honest. So honestly, so my journey, my sister was already working at the business, but she was like leaving, coming back, leaving, coming back. My brother had come into the business working in the pricing area. I would say for the most part, the interesting thing is when we were small and there was like maybe 7 of us, my dad, he was in the military. He was a police officer at one point. So his leadership style was very different than what mine is today. And specifically because of that, or not that I was like him, but to be quite honest, he was kind of like a dictatorship. And I'm very honest about that. He would stand behind you when you're working. God forbid you make a mistake. We had some women that even me, we cried all the time. It was just very challenging. I know he meant well, but he wanted us to do a really good job. So one of the things I think my dad did, though, he specifically watched how we all worked. And I always, was a hard worker no matter what I did. I always had 2 or 3 jobs. So I just did whatever needed to be done and I jumped into things. So my dad just started taking me on like sales trips with him. At one point, visiting our customers, shippers, carriers. And then I was involved in doing claims and HR and accounting. Like I've worked every role in this whole company that we have to this day. But I would say the dynamic was interesting because at one point during that journey, like my brother never wanted to be like in a role that was, say, leadership, so to speak. I know, like, if you think about it, the one question I get, like most fathers, you have that son that wants to take over the business. And my brother's 11 months older than me. And I think my dad knew that he wasn't the person that he wanted to appoint, say, the president. I didn't ask for the role either.
And sorry, just to get into the weeds. Did your brother know that? Like, was he open to the idea, or did he want it at least in principle, or at least to like, prove that he was up to the challenge? There's a lot in there, right?
Right. Yeah, no, he definitely did not. I think he just wanted to work and do the job and be told what to do, not necessarily be the one making decisions and leading. Because at one point, my dad did appoint him to the COO position. And it got to the point where like the things my brother should have been doing or could have learned to do, he didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do those things where I had to ask my dad at one point, like, hey, I need help because like this is not the role for him. He doesn't want to do it. He can't do it. He doesn't have the skill set for it. And he was okay with that. He just didn't want to. He has an issue with conflict and he's very open with that. And that's fine. But you can't be in a role like that if you're not going to face those fears and do what you need to do. So he was totally okay with that, didn't want that. My sister, on the other hand, You know, at one point she was running our finance group and there was some challenges there with her. And at one point, like she was having health issues. I said, why don't you just, work from home? I'll have you just do charity stuff or whatnot, and I'll lower your salary. She did that. And ultimately, I knew she wasn't the right person for the company because there were at times customers or carriers that, she would get upset with. And, it just wasn't a way that we would deal with things. So that was kind of a way, like she left the company. She actually started her own clothing business, but at one point she decided she wanted to come back. And when that came, I told my dad, like, we're not going to hire her back. She's not the person for the position. I know that that would upset people that were already here that worked with her, that just wouldn't fly. And that caused a lot of contention between me, her, and my father, because my dad was just like, well, I don't care what those people think, like, fire them. And I'm like, no, like, that's not how it works, Dad. Like, I'm trying to run this business the way it needs to be run. And if it's not the right person, it's not the right person. And it caused a lot of conflict with me. I have to deal with that, not him. So it was months and he would get so upset with me. But at this point, though, I had the 51%. So I could not, or he could not overrule my decision. Again, it took a lot of time to get him to even understand. And my sister and I didn't talk for quite some time, but it also caused her to want to sell her shares back to the company because of it. She wanted nothing to do with it because of that. And again, I wanted to build a company that's not just family here because you're family. Like, if you're not the right person for the role, I'm not going to just make a role for you because you're family. And that I was very clear about that. So my sister, this is a very interesting remark she has said to me over time, like, why didn't Dad let us compete to run the business, like, for that position? I said, I think he was watching us and he chose me to run the business. It wasn't like, he had to say, hey, this is what I'm looking for out of you two, and, all of that. He just watched how we work and who was doing what. And he made that decision and appointed me president in 2007. And at the end of the day, she just felt like she got slighted and she wanted to work here in this position with me. And at the end of the day, I just told her, like, look at all the stuff we've gone through and it's ruined our relationship. And I said, that's not what I wanted. I said, so I will say, as of last year, she literally told me that she understands why I made that decision. And she understands that, like, having our personal relationship is better than her being here and it destroying the relationship further. And that's what I wanted to protect at the end of the day. So that was definitely a challenging thing to go through, because once I also got the 51%, the other thing too was, like, my dad, we all had leased vehicles and my dad had one for her, and, like, he was still allowing her to have it and he was still paying her a little bit of money. Like, I cut off the money. We bought out the lease. Here you go. You're not getting another car. Like, there were times my dad would ask me for a loan, or he wanted to do this where I know it would be okay. But, like, I was like, no, you can't take a loan from the company. Like, I wanted to do it the right way, because I know that most owners, in some cases, they spend money recklessly or they do things that are more personal. And at the end of the day, I knew that if I had someone running this company with me and they see this stuff that's going on, they're not going to want to put their all into building this business if this is what's going on. So it's definitely been an extremely rocky journey for me. And at one point, I did put my resignation in. And this was prior to my 51%. And I think then is when my dad realized, like, all right, I need to, like, settle down and chill out a little bit. And I will say, over time, like in 2007, like, he did step back. He wasn't coming in as often, but he would still call me every day. And sometimes it would be during work hours. And still, even though I was president, I think one of the biggest things that I went through was I ultimately got another COO at the time, removed my brother from that role. And that guy was actually able to get things done with my dad that I couldn't. And I don't know if it was because, I dropped out of college. He would always say, we need to hire people with degrees. Well, I didn't have one. I didn't have maybe as much experience as this other guy, but it was like he was favoring him over me. But I knew how to get through the system to get things done. Because even though as the president, I still felt like I didn't have full control, if that makes sense. But obviously in 2014 is when that changed. I fired that COO. My dad would not fire him, and it needed to happen. And that was like a turning point where it was like, I'm taking control of this, and this is going to be my baby now, and it's going to be my decisions going forward with the team here. So, it's definitely been interesting, because I feel like even though my dad picked me to do that, I felt like I've had to prove to him my whole career that I could do it. Even when I appointed John, who's my COO, he's been here 17 years, to that role, he was like, he's too young, and he's not been in the business as long. And I'm like, Dad, he's the smartest guy I know. Like, I work with him every day. Like, I know he can do, and he learned everything he had to learn. And even though John didn't have that background, like, he has done a phenomenal job, because when I took over, we were probably like 32 million or somewhere in that range, and has helped us get to the 100 million mark since that has happened. So it's been an interesting journey.
So there's like 35 things I want to comment on there, and I can't all of them, but you hit on something I do want to come back to that has nothing to do with that story, but I just want to go back on a few things there you said. I think it's super interesting thinking about, well, there's a lot of stuff there, but I mean, one is kind of the idea that as the, in this case, to the parent, and as they leave the business, it's like you can empathize with them from the perspective of, like, I think like retiring in general, if that's what happened, or some version of that, is very, very difficult, and especially of certain generations where work was so much, I think, more predominant in sort of your self-worth and who you were. And so when that kind of goes away from you, or relinquish that, it becomes very difficult. It's like, it is like, probably, I think, I don't know that maybe it's generational. I don't know, but maybe, I don't feel like I suffer from that, maybe the way that my dad would, for instance. But I think, like, my dad owns a drum store. He's going to work there till he's 95 years old. He still goes in every day. He's in his 70s. He works more hours than most people I know. He loves it. Like, he loves it, but he'll quite probably literally die in there. You know what I mean? He just keeps going there all the time. He's been doing it for 100 years. He'll do it for 100 more. And so I think it's interesting to thinking about kind of the proxy setup. So even where you were like, I'm in here, but I'm still trying to, like, prove myself back to you. There's this sort of this COO plant almost over here, and, like, just the navigation of all of these things. And I think that this family dynamic is, it never gets to turn off. You are privy to the emotional chaos that's occurring when you walk out. So right now you have people working in that company, as do I here, that when they leave here, they are in emotional turmoil about shit that's going on here that I don't even, maybe I don't know what it is. Maybe I do know what it is, but I don't know the extent or the breadth of it. But when it's like family like this, you get the full package. So it's like, yeah, things are going weird at work. I get it. There's probably something off, and they're probably complaining to their partner at home. Okay, get it. But you get all of that, and you become like, it's so consuming. So, you're kind of talking about this. So this multi-month process that must have been a really long multi-months. Like, that must have just felt where your dad wasn't talking to you, and you put a resignation letter in, and, like, that just sounds super intense and super heavy. And it must have felt like that took 100 years.
Yeah, honestly. And on top of that, like, I felt like, honestly, a lot of it was just the way my dad had treated me and the team. And at the end of the day, we're trying to do the best that we can do. And, like, there's no reason to talk to someone that way, or in that voice or that manner that he was doing. And a lot of people that have been with me, half of our staff has been with me anywhere from 9 to 24 years. So a lot of people that have been here a long time have witnessed some of this, obviously. And like I said, I don't want to take away from the fact that my dad gave me a great opportunity, but it was like, you gave me an opportunity, wouldn't really let me do the job I needed to do. I had to go through other avenues to get it done. And then eventually, when I got the 51%, that's when I had to put my foot down and start making the tough decisions that I knew I had to make. And I'll even speak about this, God love my dad, he passed away a couple years ago, but he had a third wife that, initially, like, he put in place a agreement to pay her money when he passed away, or whatnot. And things happened. He took it out of place, but she was not a good woman, is all I'm going to say. And when I got the 51%, eventually he got back with her and wanted me to put it in place, and I refused. And that had been a fight for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
I mean, like, he cornering me, like, even threatening to sue me, to be quite honest, at one point. And at the end of the day, I just kept telling him, it's about the business. It's about the business, the people here. Like, I know how hard it is to earn money, and I'm not going to just earn money to give it out the door that way. Like, I'm sorry that, like, unfortunately she was pressuring him in this case as well. But like, it was really challenging to keep focused on what I needed to do, but I knew what my focus was, right? And I did not let him derail that. And walking out of here, it's funny you say that, because like, he always wanted to talk to me during the day. And I had to tell him, like, you need to call me at night. Like, I am literally busy. Like, I know, because there was a point he stopped coming in,
Mhm.
and he just wanted to know what he wanted to know, when he wanted to know it. And if I was even on the phone with a customer, he would tell our receptionist, well, you need to tell her to get off the phone and pick up this call. And I'm just like, Dad, like, I'm on the phone with a customer. Like, this is more important than, I'm sure, anything you need to tell me. And it was always something like that didn't matter.
Yeah.
And so I just stopped. I just ignored him,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't call him back sometimes for a few days. And then I had to set boundaries. And even to the point when we got together for holidays, my husband didn't even want to go to dinner or anything if we were talking about business. And I said, guys, like, even with my brother and stuff, I'm like, we have to shut it off. I cannot talk about business outside of here with you two when we're at a family function anymore. Like, it was a lot. I think some people really don't realize how challenging it can be working with family and like shutting that off, because it doesn't really shut off.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where I was very angry with my dad at one point, and it was hard because it was business related, right? And then trying to separate that from personal was very hard for me. Obviously, I came to a situation where my dad ultimately got sick, and I ended up taking care of him and had to take some months off of work to do that in the end. Um, but at the end of the day, like, it was a very tough challenge that I feel like I've had to earn every single
Yeah.
spot, that I've gotten to this top. And looking back 25 years ago, like, sometimes I'm like, would I do this all again? And I don't know. Like, it damaged a lot of things, but I feel like I'm the peacemaker in the family. So like, I'm the only one out of five of us that, I talked to all of the siblings and got along with everybody. So I will say, like, that's a good thing. And I feel like I remember saying at one point, 20 years from now, this is going to be so big if I just like deal with it, like, just deal with it. And here I am today, and it's just me and my brother.
Yeah.
So
Well, I will say I commend you on the discipline, which must have been excruciating at times to maintain that, because the some of those practices, if you will, borrow money from the business, write up these weird, side card agreements, and these types of things, like, that is how small businesses act.
yeah,
And in order to take a business to the scale in which that you have today, that infrastructure could not be in place, because that's one of many. You do, and this is, you obviously identified this and nipped this, and God, that must have been hard. I honestly don't think I would have the intestinal fortitude to do what you did. I honestly don't. Thinking through that, just knowing that my own sort of I don't like conflict, and then when I do, it goes too far. So like, I'm not good in conflict. Like, the whole thing is like, I need to avoid it, and I have an avoidant personality and all these things. So there's a bunch of things there. It's like, I don't know that I would have the ability to look that straight in the face and just say no. But what I do know, just from being around and seeing many types of businesses, I suppose, is that is small business behavior. You wouldn't be where you were today if you hadn't have made those decisions. So at least from the outside looking in, with 20 minutes of data, call it, I can say with a high degree of confidence that those decisions, if the decision was about moving the business forward, building legacy, material wealth for future, all the things that we do this for, and just honestly, the downright fun and exuberance of doing this, you wouldn't be able to do this under the
yeah.
weight of those decisions. So, I mean, good on you. And that takes some balls. So,
Yeah.
also, like, props on that.
And I will say this though, like, I was a very timid, shy person as well. Like, I don't think I liked conflict either, but I knew, like, if I wanted to lead this company and make it bigger, like, I had to, or just even like public speaking, like, I had to do it, and it was terrifying, right? But I will say, like, going through the situation I did, it definitely made me a stronger leader, or the leader I am today, for sure, because it really, like, I think at an early point, I knew all the things that my dad had done, that like, we just can't do this and have a business that's going to grow and people respect that. where we're at. Cause I think everyone kind of knew some of this stuff. My dad bought 3 condos and they were on the company. And soon as I got that ownership, we sold all of them. My husband fixed up one, we sold it, got someone else to buy the other one. Like, I'm like, get this off our books, like, so it was just one of those things. I knew that like I didn't want to ever be in a position because like my dad always took the money out of the company, all of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And we had one bad year in 2013 where we had lost money, and that was due to the COO that I actually fired. I fired multiple people. I had to lay off a lot of people because of the decision that was made. But I knew I never wanted to sit in front of the bank again in a situation like that when we owed them money. And all of that was the reckless decisions that he made,
Yeah.
And so I think when you go through it too, it's even just more real about like, this is how you need to run a business. Like, I don't care if you're small, family, whatever. At the end of the day, like, I have a goal and I have good people that want to help me get there. And this is what we need to do.
You said something really interesting, not related to the family dynamic, but thank you for all the, thank you for the vulnerability and the real honesty there. It makes for an excellent conversation. I think an excellent podcast. So good on you, and thank you for the content.
Yeah.
But you said something that, and I think this is a really interesting point. You said we were at 32 million, and I brought in the COO, smartest person I know, still working there. One of those like world-class operators that when we find those people to surround ourselves with, like you want to hold them tight and, hopefully he doesn't listen because he's too busy working. But if he does, like, you can pay them whatever they want.
Right.
And the other, like, so my question is though, a lot of brokers really hit a ceiling there around 30 mil. Like that is like a material kind of ceiling mark for brokerage. Yeah. What does it mean for the role of the CEO to help you go from 30 to 100? I'm super curious. And I think our audience is just like, they would kill me if I didn't come back and hit on that piece there. So like, what is it? What does that mean? How does that look like?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it honestly was truly looking at just being more than just one provider for one mode. So like one thing I didn't talk about initially is like we do a lot of intermodal, and that's the biggest piece of our business. But we also have the truck brokerage, which we started to build out due to our intermodal customer base. The LTL service was also something we started in 2015 when we made an agreement with Knichel Logistics, because we had some LTL, but we couldn't scale that with just the pricing that we had. We needed to partner with someone who had a lot better pricing that we were able to get in the door, and we grew exponentially because of that. So that's one of the things as well, is like building out those different service offerings. We built out the agent model. The other thing, becoming woman owned too, that also opened us up for the supplier diversity and government side. But I will say that's taking a very long time. Obviously, it's been like 7 years.
Yeah, to get that,
really? Yeah, to get that off the ground. But I will say, like, because my dad kept saying, like, I gave you this 51%. Now he's is it really actually paying off? And it wasn't for a while, but now I wish he was alive to be like, yeah, Dad, it's actually paying off now.
Yeah.
But on top of that, I bought a company in 2012, a small brokerage that helped add to our revenue side of things and brought some talent in. I did actually purchase a company last year as well to bolster our LTL to get a little bit bigger, because now we're going to be in a position eventually to get away from Blue Grace and kind of do our own thing and build that out. So it's kind of like taking stepping stones of finding different, in my opinion, different ways of revenue too. Because I know brokerages, they can get super big, and a lot of them, if you're just talking truck brokerage, for example, some of them just do transactional freight. Some of them specialize in something specific. Like, I think having a niche is really important and being really good at it, but then being able to expand off of that niche. And I will say it was challenging because, like I told you, I dropped out of college. I did go to Sandler Institute for Sales. During the WBEN, which is woman-owned certification, had like a business class that I took. And then surrounding myself by other leaders in the industry, reaching out. Like, I literally reached out to other CEOs and asked for advice. And I got myself a coach and a speech coach. And it was really just finding all these different things, because I'll say this, every 25 million, you need to change things. And it sounds like, I don't know, I'm sitting here saying at 100 million, it took us 20 years to get here because this is our 20th year in business, but like, we're growing on our own money. We don't have outside capital. But I think doing it this way, I'm more comfortable with, and being more careful about how we're acquiring our growth and what kind of customers we want to work with. I think we're always going to be really big on the intermodal side, but I also want to be able to offer our customers a lot more other options if they have other, whether it's warehousing, international. So we have strategic partnerships with other companies because they're not something I would want to build from scratch,
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. But I think the other thing too is really surrounding yourself by really good people. We have a really good culture here where not many companies can say that, we have roughly 30 people that have been here from 9 to 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time, for people to work for a company. And some of my top leaders here, have been really engaged with the company. John, who runs the company, treats it as if it's his company. I started a phantom stock program, that allows him to get equity within the company, which I'm trying to figure out something for some other people in the company as well. And the other thing too is, I think the other challenge getting there is like having a lot of those same people that worked for me a long time. With all the changes that we've done, getting leadership coaches for them. I brought in leadership coaches. 70% of my staff is women. It's kind of interesting, what we've built out here, but my John that runs the company, he actually works with our leadership coach, which is a woman, to better understand and learn to work better with women too, because there are so many women here. But I think it's important to really, work with your employees, make sure that they're getting trained up. Because it's, to be quite honest, I think I'm sitting here still blown away. Like we made it to this level. But it was just really working hard and having a team of people that were really, willing to do that as well with us, knowing what the big picture was and taking care of those people, which I think is just, it's been a great journey to talk about.
So I think, so to sum that up and tell me if I missed something, what I heard was, remind me to come back to that 25 million change in the business, if I forget, and I won't because I just said it out loud. But so I heard diversify was something. So we were primarily intermodal, and then we just started looking at other things. And it sounds like it was to complement our suite of services with our existing customer base. And then that will take on a life of its own and have its own sales motions where you'll be selling strictly pure play LTL shippers as an example, if we're using LTL.
Right.
But initially it was about sort of share of wallet expansion, maybe we'll call it. And then there sounds like you did a sales agency model. Is that correct? Did I hear that in there?
Yep.
So that's cool. And I have so many things I want to talk to you about. So that's interesting. I maybe want to hear about that. I don't know if we have time, but I'm always curious about how those worked and some. Fuck it, we're going to talk about that. So I do want to comment, and then also culture, obviously massive. 70% women. I was going to say this at the end of the show, but I'll just say it now for anybody who's listening to the show who really likes this and likes this vibe. And I'm actually going to say this to you as well. You should listen to the Freight Famous show with Jackie Myers. Because it's just really, I think you guys are like friends and you don't even know it. Like this is going to land. Right. And her experiences are dissimilar, but similar at the same time. It's just, there's a vibe. You'll get it. And anyone listening who has listened to that, they totally get it with me saying that too. It's one of my favorite shows, but I would say that. Okay. So two things I want to talk about there. So one thing is, when you talk about that 25 million reinventing the business, the way I've thought about this, is this what you're saying? It's almost like when you hit that level, I think of it like a set of stairs. You kind of grow straight up, and all of a sudden you kind of hit that, we'll call it 25 million. I think that's actually exactly sort of the number in my mind. I've always thought it to be around 20, but it doesn't matter. It's give or take.
Yeah,
it is somewhat subjective. It's not a perfect number. And then it's like, you're going to flatline for a little bit because you almost need to like hire in advance of the next journey, but where you're about to go. So you need to add on new management layers is kind of the easiest way to think of it. There's other things too. But it's like this. So you kind of have to almost like, you can kind of see the other destination on the other side of the chasm, but you've got to just buckle up, hold your breath, and go for it until you kind of cross that period of time till you break that revenue threshold, and then you can start climbing again. And then it seems like, it's to your point, it's like at every 25 million roughly along the way, you kind of have to do the same thing. Is that a fair like analogy on how you think about that?
Yeah, you have to analyze how you're doing everything, because then as you get bigger, the volume and become more efficient, and if you keep doing things the same way and you're making the same amount of money, like that's kind of how it was until like we were lingering under 50 million for a couple years, and it was like, why can't we get past this 50 million? Like
Yeah.
once we did, we soared to 75. And but now, even being where we're at, part of that too is even just like when I moved up in my role, like I was running the sales team until about 4 months ago, even. And I was still involved with some of the ops and some of that stuff. And like, I don't need to be involved in that. I shouldn't be involved in that. And part of that change, even just for me alone, is like what my role is and what I need to be looking at now that we're at this size versus, just like wondering what ops is doing and did this load get delivered because this salesperson or, is asking. I mean, just even simple things like that. Part of it was getting me into a better strategic thinking mindset and what I need to really focus on myself, but also how we're operating. Like we actually spent about $1 million last year upgrading all our TMS systems, and we got a new finance software and CRM and HR software. I mean, I think 7 systems total. And it was a very painful change for everybody over the last year. And we have one more system change that's going to be the end of this year. But with that being said, like those are some of the changes. Like for us to get better, we need better technology, efficiencies. Like instead of like being able to handle 10 loads a day, we need to do 15, 20, 30 loads a day. Like, it's really, that's what happens once you start to get to that size. You start to have more liability and some risk and things that happen that like maybe didn't happen when you were that smaller, because you have more customers, you just have a lot more out there that's at risk. So you have to reevaluate everything that you're doing, and are you doing the right things? And even just the way that the culture's been, I think that's the hardest thing to hold on to, as far as like, being that family business, being open door, very talkative. Some of these people I sat next to and worked with them, but like separating myself some now, and just really understanding that it's challenging to do those things, but you have to, so that you can continue to grow and hit your goals.
Okay, talk to me about the do's and don'ts, surprises and otherwise, of starting agent sales program.
So I would say initially, I think the fact that, anytime someone's interested to come on and we're like, we'll help you grow and we'll help you figure it out. Okay, well, that was a don't.
Okay. Tell me why.
Yeah, I would say why, because you put too much time and energy into training someone that ultimately they just didn't work out. They didn't have the energy, or, they just didn't want to do it themselves. They didn't want to put the time and effort in fully themselves, and they just didn't typically work out. Because I was always that person that wanted to give someone a chance. Right. And I also felt like supporting the agent model, because they're like customers too. We're always wanting to support them, help them grow. But what I find out is most of them don't want that. And the ones that did were the ones that didn't really know how to do it. But then it was just like they would make those mistakes of hiring the carrier, not vetting it properly. And I think that's the biggest thing, is like another don't, or I guess like surprise or issue, is like we have a few bad reviews and they're because of the agents.
And just so I'm clear, so this is not, they're actually like broker agents. So they're like dispatching the freight, selling the freight, Landstar Eskimo. So like in that kind of model?
So some of them are operating agents, and excuse me, some of them are sales agents. We operate their freight. So the ones that are operating are probably the ones that are more risky.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially if they haven't been around and haven't done this before.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I would say the other part of it too is like we've learned early on is if, usually they have a book of business if they're coming from somewhere or whatnot. If they don't have a book of business of size, and I'm talking at least probably like say 2 million or 1.5 million, et cetera, they're probably not worth bringing on as well, because again, you spend most of your time with the ones that are really small and mistakes and issues that they're having in the system and whatnot, which has made it challenging. So I think some of the things we've learned is obviously like, we've become, our agent program is non-exclusive, so you don't have to be exclusive to us. And a lot of that I think is a good thing in one sense, because a lot of agents come to us too because of our intermodal. There's not a lot of options or companies out there to go to. And even if you are an agent, say of Landstar or Mode, because they're big, there's a lot of customers that are tied up where we don't have a ton of that. We've, now we have like 6 or 7 salespeople and maybe 30 agents, but there's probably only like 8 that do a good bit of substance,
Right.
So again, I think it's really vetting them and picking the right ones and making sure what type of business they have too. So like we have some really good agents that know their stuff, that are really good at bringing on business and managing it, and have really grown their business significantly with us. I want to say one of our agents, his first year brought on 12 million in revenue.
Holy moly.
Yeah, and uses us for dedicated intermodal and dedicated truckload. And he also does some of his own stuff direct with other carriers. So he uses us as a vehicle for that because he doesn't have access to the intermodal side.
Can I ask you a question on this non-exclusivity thing? It's actually super interesting. And again, you strike me as the type that would be into this. Because you seem very open-minded and very blue ocean theory driven. So
Yeah.
How do you ensure that just doesn't become that you're not just sort of being used as a low-cost provider in that model? Or are you okay with that?
Yeah, so I would say in that case, like, so if you're, in my opinion, I feel like what that does though is they're going to use us because they know what our strengths are. So if we're not going to be really good at pricing on the truck side for some opportunities or whatnot, they can go do that somewhere else.
Got it.
I would say, I don't know that we've ever had a situation, well, I guess 2, where like, say a bigger company, like a Coyote, for example, I think TQL was one of them at one point that reached out to me about doing intermodal at one point. And then you had a bunch of reps that were just didn't really know it. And then it was like quote after quote and nothing was coming through. We're like, okay, this is not working. This is not what we want.
It's like working with freight forwarders.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Like if you're going to send all those quotes, like it's just, and plus them not even understanding it. We want to educate them, but like to us, like, yeah, we will shut that off because at the end of the day, that's not going to be the case. Now, the thing is, they could utilize multiple other companies to try to get that low cost intermodal. And if we find that they're not doing a whole lot with us or whatnot, we have those conversations and usually cut them. There's no reason to have that. So I don't think there's a whole lot of that say would go on with us. But when we did, it was something that was definitely cut. But yeah, I mean, from when we started it to where we are today, there's definitely things that we're looking at to bolster our contracts a little bit more. Because as you know, like with agents, I'm sure they get paid weekly. I mean, for you to compete, to have that in your tool belt, so to speak, you have to pay them weekly, and you're paying them before you get paid.
Yeah.
In hopes that you get paid.
Yeah.
Clearly, we're setting credit and all that stuff. So that's on us. And we do carrier credit insurance, but it's one of those things that's also risky too when you do that. So I think it is even more important that you're making sure you bring on the right partnerships and the right people that are doing the right things, because going back to our reviews, the only bad reviews we have are because of agents badgering customers. So that's the one part. I think the agent program is great, but I don't want it to be like more than 25% of my business because again, even if you were to sell the company down the road, that's not going to be something that someone's going to be like, hey, this isn't something that's tangible. Like you're not going to, agents can leave soon as the company's potentially bought. They're not tied into a contract with us. And then again, the control factor. I mean, we just talked about this yesterday. Some companies have scaled back how many operating agents they have to control how are you talking to carriers? How are you talking to customers? I have a really good brand out there and I don't want that brand ruined because this side's bringing in a good bit of revenue, but how do we fine tune it so that it's better for the company overall and doesn't ruin our image?
How do agents how do you find agents? How do they find you? That's always been a very opaque world to me.
Yeah.
Like, where do they hang out? Like, I go to like a bar and you walk in. Like, where are all these agents?
No, so there's a lot of them out there. So I'll tell you this, like ones that I linked up with a bunch on LinkedIn, but a lot reach out to us because of our marketing, or they've heard of us, they know of us. And then, honestly, there hasn't been a whole lot where we've actually recruited some, because the woman that I have running that, she's kind of been so busy working on other stuff that like hasn't had a whole lot of time, but we get a ton of inquiries through our website. And then we do have a guy that's an agent for us that also does some recruiting. Like so to speak, because he's lived in the agent world for a long time. So he knows a lot of people at a lot of different companies. But part of it is targeting, like you can find a lot of them on LinkedIn because, if you look at anyone who's tied to a Landstar mode, there's a lot of companies out there that have those programs. But honestly, a lot of them just come to us, to be quite honest. So it's kind of interesting.
That's a good way to, nothing beats inbound. So that's a good way to do it.
Yeah,
and otherwise,
right?
and you have direct salespeople as well. Like this is like how
Yes.
you said, then they work for you. Got it. Okay. So, this has been great. So, okay. So I've got a bunch of notes on here. It's like, so you're a woman.
Yes.
Okay. And you're a mom.
Yep.
And, I guess like, so the idea is I would like preamble into like, okay, so like that must be really hard, like doing all that kind of stuff and, and balancing it and all that. I guess maybe without the, like, we know each other now, so we can just like have a conversation. Like, you have 70% women working in the company. That's intentional, or at least a good byproduct and one you're trying to maintain, I think, to a certain degree, obviously. What does it mean to you to be a woman in this industry?
Oh, I think it's awesome, to be quite honest. Like I absolutely love it. Because I didn't know what it was when I got into it, but when I did get into it and I traveled, and even to this day, like I'll be in a room of 100 men in a rail meeting and I'm the only woman. To this day, there might be one other woman. There might be one or two from the railroad. So it was a very challenging from that aspect as well. But I think it's extremely important because I think women are very good multitaskers. And what I love about it is I had a really challenging journey and I do a lot of mentoring with other women. And that's part of why we have so many women, because women want to come work for me because they see what I'm doing. I put podcasts out there as well. We do a lot of marketing. I speak a lot. And people are just like, I want to come work for a woman-owned company because I don't want to say there's definitely a good bit out there, but like there's not a ton out there, that are doing this. And I feel like over the last couple of years, it's gotten a lot, I guess, more visual, I guess, women owners speaking out, or you see a lot more companies than you thought there were, that kind of thing. But I mean, I think it's awesome to be able to be a mom. My husband's a stay-at-home dad at this point. I mean, my son's going to be 13, but like, I just feel like to be able to do this and then give back and help other women, help other people in general. I'm part of a CEO founder startup group as well. And that's the one thing I'd love to do is I want to be able to help other people like do things and maybe not make the mistakes that I made, or give them resources any way I can help them. And I just think it's so awesome that I got the opportunity to do this. And I dropped out of college and, here I am, like it wasn't handed to me. I had to work hard to get here, and surrounding myself by really smart people, and at the end of the day, like I'm the face of the company, we call it, and I think that to me is just fun. Like I'm not, like I told you before, I'm not the one who wants to typically be out there speaking in the public, but I think it's so important because someone needs someone to look up to out there. And there's just been so many people that have been inspired by what I have done. And I'm like, you can do this too, and sometimes people just need to hear that. And I just love being able to do that and give back.
It's a nice place to be, and it's a nice place to come from. So how do you think about, through these observations and being one of 100, women in a room, and like, if you had to give advice to men, which is that's a separate show, but like, how can they better work with women, or like what mistakes do you still see like today in 2023, not like, not 1984, like what is actually still going on that are obvious and common, maybe mistakes that men are overlooking in terms of just working better with women, or even like leaning into the strengths of women even. And so, because there is a unique skill set that's incredibly powerful. And if you unleash it, it's like, it is a 1 + 1 = 3 for sure.
Yeah. I think part of it is just understanding like women can help you they do bring that unique skill set to the table that can ultimately help you as a team. I think one of my women leaders told me last week, where she was talking to a carrier that's been asking me for business, but literally said to her that, like, well, we don't let the women in the warehouse because that's not where they belong.
Huh. That was said recently?
Oh yeah, 2 weeks ago. And
Holy.
yeah, because this carrier was asking me for business, and she's like, yeah, we don't use him anymore, and like he
Yeah.
talks down to us. And I mean, I've had that before too. Like, they wanted to talk to a manager. I'm like, I'm the manager. They're like, well, no, I want to talk to a man. And so I think, there's not a whole lot of that I do see. I think the biggest thing is women and men are so different. And I think that men need to understand what they can actually gain from working with the women, and also like lifting them up as well. We need more men lifting women up and knowing that like that can help the bottom line. It can help so many different things. And I've had customers reach out to me and say, hey, I have some women in my company. Where do you suggest like they get some help? I'm like, I can send you some articles. There's women in trucking. We have a ladies leadership coalition podcast where we talk about things. It's finding mentors, and I always tell them they can reach out to me and I can give them some guidance. And so I think the biggest thing is, men just understanding that we're not the enemy, right? We're here to also help. And it's not like, I don't know if men get threatened, and I think it depends on the woman too, because like obviously there's some that can be feisty just like men too, and it's a personality thing. But the one thing that John did here specifically was take leadership coaching from a woman to learn how to better work with women and understand how they think, and like, how do I deal with the emotional side? Because men have emotions too. And we've talked about this recently, where there's a lot of women that cry and that they outwardly just cry. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but like when you're in a meeting with a man and it makes you uncomfortable, it's like, how do you deal with that and addressing that thing? So I think that's part of it too, is just, figuring out how do you work better with them, and asking for that help. And I think having just conversations with women, like, how do you think you can, help this situation, and asking them to hear their voice,
Yeah.
just to be heard. And I think I see a lot of that happening though. I think there's more and more over the past year, where there is a lot more men engaged in that. But like, I went to Manifest last year, a conference, and they had a women in supply chain lunch, and there was maybe 10 men in the whole room. And there was a lot of men there, but they were like thanking the men for showing up, because there are a lot of women coming into this space. And I think women can be very beneficial to men, just like men can be to women too. Like, I'm not one-sided or the other. It's who's best for the job. But I think together we can be better,
Yeah. Men are generally speaking incredibly insecure, and this leads to a lot of these challenges.
Yeah.
And okay, so how was Manifest, by the way?
I would say I was disappointed last
Yeah.
year, specifically because it was super expensive. They didn't have like drink stations set up and things like that. There was a lot of people. I didn't really get a chance though it wasn't like more of trying to get business though. It was more of a networking, and
Okay,
I
yeah.
knew a lot of people. Like, there was a lot of people I didn't know, but so I'm not going to be going this year. I try things out and I want to be more intentional where I go. They did ask me to speak this year, but I decided not to, just because of other things I had. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'll be better this year or whatnot. But there's so many of them. That's the thing, and they're expensive. You know what I mean? Before you know it, $10,000 is spent, and are you getting an ROI on it?
Well, yeah, I mean, think from our perspective, we're a vendor in these spaces, so we do freight waves and all these things, and yeah, like you can put a zero at the end of those numbers for us, and you do it 10 times. It's like this is serious, and you can't stop. Like, as a vendor, you can't just not show up one time. You're like, whoa, what, are you out of business or something? Are you broke? Like,
I
so
know.
you gotta like, once you go, man, you start rolling this thing. It's like you can't stop. Anyway, we can have another show on like that on the Cummins and Go. We should actually do like a review. Oh, this is a good idea for a show. We should do like a review of like the different conferences and things like that. Like, we should do and we'll get like people in who actually did it. And anyway, this is a good idea.
You should, because you guys actually sponsored the panel that I was on at TIA.
Look at that.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, what is this? Like,
Yeah.
because they didn't have sponsors before, but like I was on the board of directors when I came off this year, but I was the intermodal chair, and
Okay.
we do an intermodal panel every year, but Rose Rocket was the actual
Well, look
sponsor.
at that. So there
Yeah.
you go. Yeah. So we can get some like good feedback. We're going to do this. Like, this is a good idea for sure. Okay, cool. We're like out of time, but I haven't even got to my notes yet.
That's all right.
Okay. That was sweet, Kristy. Thanks very much. That was an awesome show. We went in a completely different direction, I thought, but I couldn't be more thankful for it. That spontaneity, that was great. The energy was amazing, and really grateful for having you come on, and really grateful for your willingness to be super transparent. That was just, that made for a very rewarding show for me, at least, and I'm sure our listeners too. So thank you for the gift.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. Like I said, I think more people need to do that and be open about like, it's not all roses out here,
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's real. So, yeah, thanks. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. And I'm sure you like that. And, if you did, then push the buttons that say like, I guess you subscribe, but I don't know, download it, do something, show us that you're listening. And until next time, be well.